program today that you will not want to miss. So we are ready to advance into some preliminary comments and announcements, and then we will present our session. We're going to talk about success stories today. Of course, we're going to have a main speaker. We're going to share active job leads, which everybody is interested in, no doubt, and partner updates, as well as next time at Job Club. The mission of Job Club has not changed in the last 9 years that we have been in existence, and that's to provide a positive environment for job seekers to network and to learn best practices for the job search. We meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, and you can find the schedule of topics at www.ukalumni.net/jobclub. So be sure to go to that website, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what's available there in a few moments. I'd like to introduce our team. These are the facilitators for Job Club. I am Diana Doggett. I'm a extension specialist at the University of Kentucky, FCS. We also have Caroline Francis, who's the Director of Alumni Career Services with the UK Alumni Association. Amanda Shagney is the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services. Nicole Waite is the Employment Specialist at the University of Kentucky STEPS Temporary Employment. And then we have Suzanne Smith and Sunny Saylor, who are always holding us up and making sure that this virtual presentation as well as in-house goes smoothly. So thanks to them. Job Club is currently hosted in a hybrid format. And that means that we're here in person at the Fayette County Extension Office. We'd love for you to come. It's wonderful to network and have that one-on-one opportunity. We also are available with questions, with comments. We'd love to hear from you. And we also would love for you to tell us where you're viewing from right now. So if you could go to the chat box, we'd love to know where you're viewing, or hearing, or are participating from in Job Club. And then our third mode is Facebook Live. And that is view only. We do not have chat moderator or job leader newsletter that follows that, but we do, we totally invite you to participate in that way. You can access our presentation slides and recordings of previous Job Club sessions, and we get a lot of inquiries about that. So yes, we do record every session, and today's session will be online later this week, so be sure to check it out if you want to review. There's going to be a lot of information presented, so lots of times we like to go back and re-listen. All right, going back to our website, www.ukalumni.net/jobclub. If you go there, you're going to see an amazing array of free Job Club resources. We have a packet, and within that packet, there are informational interview tips. We have articles of interest for job seekers, resume review checklist, just a lot of information that you may need at any given time, and we're not necessarily in a Job Club session. So be sure to check that out. And in addition, we would love for you to join the Central Kentucky Job Club sharing community on LinkedIn. And you're going to hear probably 100% from every single presenter that LinkedIn is essential in today's job search. So if you're not already on, we did some preview of that at our last session, but we invite you to do that, and you could begin befriending us on this job site on LinkedIn, because we'll be sharing lots of articles, and in addition, job leads that come to us in advance to our next Job Club session. So be sure and check that out. Employers and recruiters are always welcome at Job Club. And so we allow for in-person employer guests to share in 1-minute spotlight. If they're here in person, or if you are online, please just raise your hand, and we will allow you to have that time to speak to the group later on in the program. In addition, watch your email later today for job leads that have been submitted and shared with the Job Club team. And there will be a long list, I can guarantee you. Some attendees are conducting a confidential job search. So let's please be respectful of privacy for the job search of others. Check out job search related articles included in our Job Club reminder emails. We always love to welcome first timers. So if you are a first timer, we would love for you to raise your hand. I see one in the audience right now. We are welcoming her. If you're online, please signify that you're a first timer, and we would also love to welcome you to Job Club. We'd love to know how you learned about Job Club, if you want to share that in chat box as well. And again, just a warm welcome to each and every one of you. For first timers, I'll just remind you that just one of the wonderful benefits of Job Club is receiving that email that follows this afternoon. Again, a wealth of information, lots of job leads, and it really does connect you to our communication service so that we can tell you what's going on in the world of work. So be sure and scan the QR code on the screen if you want to do that really fast and quickly, or you can visit the site that's will be in your chat box in order to sign up with us. And now it's time for success stories. Do we have any from the audience? Do we have any online? Now for first timers, if you've been with us before, you understand that we define success by multiple ways. And that means that you attending Job Club is a success story. If this is your first time, that is definitely a success story. So we know we have some out there in that regard. But we also know that if you have revised your resume, if you've joined LinkedIn, perhaps you've reached out to some past colleague or employer, and you're creating a network. Just tell us what you might have done in the last couple of weeks or month that has forwarded your job search. That's what we credit as a success story. And hearing that is, believe it or not, is very motivating to a lot of people, and especially to your Job Club team. So we love to hear from you. So take the time to share that with us. Do we have any online we want to share, Amanda? Not right now, but I know you're thinking, and I know you're going to share that with us. Well, now it's time for us to introduce our speaker. Lisa James is she's not a stranger to Job Club, and we just love having Lisa present. We probably would have you more often, but we know your time is very, very valued. Lisa brings over 26 years of experience with Robert Half, specializing in recruitment and placement of accounting and finance professionals in career opportunities with companies throughout the state of Kentucky. She started the Robert Half practice in Lexington after a 10-year career in accounting, so she understands the challenge as well as the reward of making a career path change. She is a native of Central Kentucky and a graduate of the University of Kentucky. Yay, rah! So, Lisa, thanks again for sharing with us. It's always a delight, and we will learn so much from you today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love to come, and I get so much out of these, and I hope you guys will get a little something out of this today too. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. So today we're going to be talking about insider secrets, specifically to the resume. We're going to go over a few different topics, but we're all going to be focused on the resume. We have a few minutes together. What I'd like to do is just share some tips and some tricks and what I'm seeing, what's different in the market today and such. And then I'd really like to leave it open for Q&A at the end, so that I can really answer what else might be on your mind besides the resume. So thank you guys very much for the introduction, and thank you for old stock photos. There's a little bit of a resemblance still, maybe a little bit. It's me. So my name again is, as we said, my name's Lisa James. I am the practice director and senior VP for Robert Half Finance and Accounting. So Robert Half is a staffing agency. So we work in a variety of areas of specialty. We place administrative and professionals in the administrative world. We place folks in technology. My practice does strictly accounting and finance. We do legal. So there's a variety of specialties. You'll see the QR code. If you scan that, you will have all of my contact information. And if you have questions following up from this presentation today, please feel free to reach out. If I'm not the right resource, I'll get you connected, but certainly would be happy to go over any questions or anything that you might have. But Robert Half's been around since 1948. We are the premier in staffing, and I have been a proud member of Robert Half, as this is my 27th year with the organization. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about resumes. And so the things that we're going to cover are how are employers reviewing resumes today? And what are some resume best practices? And as I said, we're going to wrap up with some Q&A after that. What I'd really like to do, if in the chat, if you guys could maybe put in a couple of notes, what do you hope to get out of today? And I'll give you just a couple of minutes to kind of add that to the chat. But what are some of the questions you might have about your resume, and what are some things that you'd really like to get out of today's session? Give us just a minute to maybe respond to that. Any responses just yet? Okay, great.
It looks like in the chat here, someone says, inspiration to improve my resume. I've been out of the market for 21 years.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Resumes have changed a little bit in that period of time, so hopefully there'll be some good takeaways from today. Thanks for the question.
Someone says, I hope to get information on how a stay-at-home parent can reincorporate into the workplace after 5+ years.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Those are great ones. Okay, so getting back into the job market after 21 years, sounds like you've been working in maybe your field, but ready to make a change. So we'll kind of talk about what's changed in resume writing. And then again, there are certainly individuals that are taking advantage of the very robust employment market that we have right now. And maybe you're kind of dabbling in maybe what you might want to do and how do you kind of handle that gap. So happy to take care of those questions for you. I'd also like to kind of know who's my audience today. So if you can, again, just in the chat, I know a couple of you have just talked about you're re-entering the workforce. Some of you are maybe mid-career and you're kind of looking at making a change, but is there anybody who's getting into the career for their first time, maybe a recent graduate that's looking and taking advantage of Jobs Club? Where are folks in the audience today kind of in your career right now? Again, you can pop that into the chat. We can get to know each other a little bit.
A couple of responses from your last question.
Okay.
How long does a recruiter spend on a resume? Education matching career. I'm sure.
Okay.
Someone says a new career in hairstyling or maybe remote work.
Okay. Okay.
We're talking about remote work.
We were. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and start digging into the resume. So no surprise, right? The resume has evolved. Case in point, everything I think we can agree has evolved pretty rapidly, at least over the last couple of years, right? And I think it's a real testimony to our ability as professionals to evolve, to face change, to succeed in change. And I think we all have our own success stories over the last couple of years about how that has evolved. Case in point, I am in person with individuals today, and we also have this opportunity to be talking virtually today. This would not have been something that I would have probably imagined 3 years ago. So, things have evolved, and certainly the resume has evolved as well. One of the biggest evolutions within employers, and from that evolution is not everybody is going to see, let me take that back. Years ago, you would send in a resume, right? And there would be a staff of individuals in the HR department, and their job was initially to review every single resume and cover letter that came in. There's still fantastic HR professionals that are out there, but they now have the assistance of artificial intelligence, applicant tracking systems. So what has evolved is your resume not only has to attract the attention of a person when they ultimately see it, but the first person that's going to see your resume is a computer, a database. So your resume has to evolve in order to attract that type of attention. And so it has to be able to be chock full of keywords and buzzwords, because those are the things that artificial intelligence is going to use in order to determine whether you're the top candidate for that job. So evolution is your resume still has to be people friendly, but it also has to be AI friendly. So there's a big evolution from that standpoint, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about the statistics. So for particular jobs, about 40 resumes may be received for a job, right? I would say a couple of years ago, that number was much higher. But employers, I'm hearing over and over again, I'm setting up advertisements for positions and I'm not getting a ton of response. I'm hopeful to get about 10, 20, 30, 40 people, right? And so about 40 people are responding to a job as kind of on average. And then about 7 of those individuals, only about 18% are ultimately selected for an interview. How do those folks get selected? The resume, right? That's the only thing that they can gauge. And so it's the resume. And again, those 7 resumes are typically being selected by some sort of artificial intelligence. And it's oftentimes those 7 resumes that are then getting that face-to-face personal interaction with someone in an HR department or a hiring manager. And then even out of that 7, only one's going to get the job. So you want to get from the 40 to the 1, and how are we going to get there? We're going to make sure that your resume is part of that 7. I've already debunked the myth. I've kind of gotten ahead of myself. Myth: employers look at every applicant. Used to be the case. Still the case in smaller companies. Not every company can afford an applicant tracking system. Not every company has the database that they can use from that standpoint. So there are still instances where you're going to submit a resume and someone is actually going to read on paper with their own eyes every applicant that comes through. But more and more likely, your resume is actually going to be seen initially by a computer. Algorithms often take the first pass at all applicants. So let's talk about that. How do you make sure that you are impressing a computer? And I hate to make it sound so impersonal, but it's just the fact of the process these days. So let's make sure that we are putting the best document forward. So the algorithm, a hiring manager through the process, a hiring manager calls human resources and says, again, my examples are oftentimes going to be accounting because that's what I work with. Accounting manager says, I need a staff accountant. I need somebody that can do general ledger, journal entries. I'd like them to have a bachelor's in accounting. I'd like for them to have SAP software experience, and I'd like them to have strong Excel skills. Those are critical keywords that an employer is relating to their human resource professional, their HR partner. Their HR partner, if they're using a computer system to use the logic to determine who of the applicants is going to be the best option, they're going to load those keywords into the algorithm, and the algorithm is then going to use logic to decide, is this the best applicant of the group? Who's the top 10% of the group? The only way that they can make logic work is the top 10 candidates that must be the most qualified have said these keywords the most frequently in their resume. So therein lies the need for resume writing to really be focused on the job that you are applying to, and that you add those keywords that are listed in the job description as often as you can in your resume. So that's the first step in making sure that you have the best chance of actually getting in the hands of someone that's going to determine if you're actually the best candidate for the job. Let me stop there for a second and see if there's any questions about that just yet. Nope, we good? Okay. 60% of leaders said that their company uses an automated system when hiring talent. So 60% of the jobs that you may be applying to are using this. So it's definitely important to be mindful that your resume, again, is going to be very computer friendly. What are some of the resume red flags? I'm sure there's probably some of them. This really hasn't evolved as much as before. Frequent job hopping, maybe a non, for a non-consulting candidate, you've moved around quite a bit. Bad formatting, sloppiness on your resume. Too long. Your resume may have too much unnecessary information, and then maybe a lack of strategic, kind of accomplishments, things from that standpoint. So let's kind of break those down a little bit. So job hopping. I will say that in the last couple of years, I have seen more resumes of candidates that have maybe stayed in positions a little shorter time than what they might normally have experienced in the past. I think there's a little grace in this period as long as you have good, compelling reason from that standpoint. Companies have had to go through changes. There have been things that have come up with our family situations. So all of those things can be explained. So I think over the last couple of years, if you've experienced some job hopping, you've experienced some interruption in your career, I think those things can be readily explained. And in a cover letter is a good opportunity to explain some of those things in a professional manner. Bad formatting. Formatting, I get resumes all the time that are beautiful. But when they get into a computer system, if they have sections where they have, colored in sections, or they've used, specialized bullets, they've done a variety of things, sometimes those don't translate, and your resume can honestly be very garbled and jumbled, and you really can't, I sometimes can't make sense of them. I'll stop and make a phone call, but not every employer is going to take the time to do that. Sometimes they'll just pass. Is there a question in the chat? Great.
What do if you don't have many references or connections to your moving often, being out of the work?
Sure. That's a fantastic question. References are important, especially in this day and age. So you want to get a bit creative, with your references. You want to be able to look for individuals that have mentored you, individuals that have, been in a situation where they have, been able to review your work in some capacity. So, and again, we are in a little bit of a transient world right now. We talked about LinkedIn at the beginning of this presentation. LinkedIn is a fantastic way to not only network with potential employers, but it is a great way to stay in touch with previous contacts. So if you can't find someone, I work with people all the time that say, I'm really having a struggle trying to find references. So we kind of try to think broad. My company won't give me a reference. It's company policy. My prior company won't give me a reference. That's company policy. Those things haven't changed, but references are still important. So go on LinkedIn, find a trusted colleague, somebody that can verify that you did good work. See if you can find somebody who's maybe no longer with the company, that maybe isn't restricted by the company laws. Once somebody has left a company, they no longer are bound by those obligations. They're no longer an employee there. So if you're struggling to find a prior contact or a prior connection, I think LinkedIn is a great route. And maybe it's somebody else that's going to be able to help you get to them. I always recommend, however, when you are listing a reference, that you do, as a professional courtesy, reach out to that individual and ask them if they're okay to be a reference for you. Any other questions in the chat? Great, absolutely.
I see many resume templates with photos in the top corner. Should I add my photo to my resume?
That is a fantastic question, and I would still say absolutely not. Again, we're in a new day of evolved evolution, right? Don't put your photo on a resume. There is lots of discriminatory information that can be gathered in a photo on your resume. We have LinkedIn. If somebody is interested in you, they're probably going to go to your LinkedIn profile. So they may see your photograph anyways, but as far as responding professionally to a job, it should still be professional, non-discriminatory information. And while we're on that topic, and I may be again getting ahead of myself, but I'll go ahead and touch on this just so that I don't forget. There's information about special interests. There's information about personal information. You want to be careful from that standpoint. You want to be careful where it involves, your family status. You want to be careful where it might involve, sometimes your church affiliations. Again, I'm very proud of my church affiliation, but that's just not something that I oftentimes put on my resume. Asterisk on that, however, as an accountant, if I was the treasurer for my church, that's germane to my search to tell you that I also practice my accounting work in other areas of my personal life. So again, there's gives and takes from that standpoint, but be careful about not putting your marital status, number of children that you have. Some people do, and again, that's just something that you don't necessarily want to put on a resume. Anything else in the chat? Yeah.
Our resume or CV preferred?
I use them interchangeably, quite honestly. I think a resume is still kind of the norm, the normal status. There's still the typical varieties that I see. I see the chronological resume. I still think that's the one that people typically still relate to the best. There's also the functional resume. I think we initially had a question of someone maybe getting back into their job search after 5 years. So if you don't necessarily want to shed immediate light on the fact that you haven't been in the workforce for the last 5 years, you may want to do a functional resume where your resume indicates that you have skills in these areas of function. You might want to put your administrative talents. You might want to put your software talents. You might want to put projects that you worked on. And after they've really fallen in love with all of the experience that you've had, then at the bottom, you're going to list what your career history has been. But they're already going to see, and you're already going to lead with things of why you're a person that they are going to want to talk to. That's the benefit of a functional resume. And oftentimes I see that used for people that are re-entering the workforce after a bit of a time away. Chronological resumes, again, I think are great. As well, if you've kind of been consistent within the job market and they can see what your career progression has been over the last several years. Yes.
Do you recommend, even if it doesn't ask about letter of recommendation for the reference? Because if they're speaking of,
Yeah. So my question is, do you recommend even if the job that you're applying for doesn't ask for a letter of recommendation from your reference? But I indicated that some were saying they had some difficulty with references. If that's an option, if it doesn't, if employer doesn't ask for that,
Sure.
would it benefit or would it be again unnecessary to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a couple of different answers to that, I would say. I think having letters of recommendation are fantastic. Keep them on file, touch base with those individuals from time to time. If that letter of recommendation might have been 5 years ago, reach back out to that person, let them know that you're starting a job search again. And is it okay that I continue to use that letter of recommendation? Because they may get a call on your behalf because it's usually in their letterhead and it has their contact information. You don't want them to be caught off guard. So one, just make sure that you're references are up to speed with the status of your search. I will typically tell candidates that on a resume, I wouldn't necessarily add references to the body of the resume. I would typically have that on a separate sheet. Candidates oftentimes will put at the bottom of the resume, resumes or references available upon request, and then you can submit those at a later time. I think if you have a separate letter of recommendation, you can maybe refer to that in a cover letter. If a cover letter is requested, you could even refer to that. I'm also including a letter of recommendation from someone that knows my work that would, like to be able to speak on my behalf. So I think if you're going to include that, maybe refer to that in a cover letter so that they know that that's there, and then maybe add that as a separate attachment if you get the opportunity. Again, sometimes when you're working with AI, it's just having you upload a resume, and sometimes if you're uploading things other than your resume, I don't know what the AI would necessarily do with that. But if it's a situation where you can send something in, it's via email and you're putting in attachments and such, then I think it's a really nice thing to be able to do. It's a great question.
So I just want to let you know, whenever I'm using this mic, they're not able to hear online for some reason. So repeat the questions whenever we go through.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Great. So again, just kind of talking about some additional red flags, lack of strategic thinking and business information. What I mean by that is, make sure that when you talk about your background and your experience, employers want to know what you've accomplished. So, this is your opportunity to really brag. Oftentimes we're kind of raised to be humble. Don't brag about yourself. All bets are off when it comes to resumes and interviews, right? They want to know what you can do. It's your time to shine and really give good examples, starting with the resume. So when you're on your resume and you're talking about your accomplishments, quantify those things. Talk about the amount of money that you have saved a company. Talk about the amount of time that you have saved on a project with a company. Let them know that you completed a project a week ahead of schedule. Again, you want to be able to quantify some of your accomplishments. And again, I think sometimes people will just not take the opportunity to really quantify those types of things. Again, you don't want your resume to be too long, and we'll talk about the size of the resume here next, but you don't want it to be too long, kind of filled with fluff. It's okay to have a resume that's 2 pages, but make sure that it's content of 2 pages that really is germane to the search and what you bring to the table. So substance over length. Again, it's okay to get, I get resumes sometimes that are so cram-packed, it's almost hard to read because the font is so small, because they have it in their mind that they want their resume to be just 1 page. That's not necessarily the case. If you have been in the workforce more than 5 years and you have had maybe a couple of positions in that period of time, you might need to take 2 pages or 1.5 pages. Again, I probably would try to stay away from anything longer than that. This is where the artificial intelligence can sometimes come to your rescue. Artificial intelligence isn't going to grade you because your resume is 3 pages long. It's, again, going to grade you on the content. So if it's a larger company and you're going through a portal, then sometimes, the size of the resume, the length of the resume won't matter, but you still want to be careful to make sure that the length is appropriate to the experience that you're bringing. One size does not fit all. Again, if you are a brand new graduate and you have a 2-page resume, there's probably something maybe a little fishy with that. Now, again, you could have had some fantastic internships. You could have been working your entire time, but you may not have enough career experience to necessarily fill 2 pages if you've just recently graduated or you're within the first 5 years of your career. But if you are, and I know somebody mentioned in the initial part of this, if you've had a 20-year career, it's probably going to take you a couple of pages to really do that justice and bring those accomplishments to the forefront. So use the time in the space that you need. But again, make sure that you have edited it appropriately, that there isn't too much fluff, but you've also taken the space to really speak about your accomplishments. I'm still a big fan of bullets. I think bullets draw your attention to specific information. I will be honest, when I see a resume that's written as an essay, I think to myself, gosh, I just don't have time to dig into this resume right now. I'll set it aside. But when somebody really draws my eye into a bullet of information, especially if that bullet is followed by an action word. So it's bullet developed, bullet created, bullet reduced. Again, it's an action word followed by that bullet. Oftentimes, I feel like that's going to really drive home that you are somebody that is going to, have action within an organization. The objective is dead. What do I mean by that? The objective is obviously to get the job that is being offered, right? So oftentimes people will say, my objective is to become a staff accountant, and lo and behold, I'm applying to a staff accounting position. That's valuable real estate on the page. So you can get rid of the objective. We just want to hear about you and what you bring to the position. So the objective is gone. If you have that currently on your resume, first step on creating a new resume, get rid of the objective. What are we going to replace that with? Long live the summary. So this is your opportunity in just a couple of lines to kind of summarize what the reader is about to see and read on your resume. A couple of things that I see that I oftentimes try to coach people to do a little bit differently. Oftentimes I will see on the summary, 20 plus years of executive experience in the area of. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a very proud statement and a great way to lead. I would tweak that a little bit to say, progressive experience, leading, and with hands-on leadership. Because again, the first example that I gave, 20 plus years of executive leadership, if you're applying for an individual contributor position, one, they might say, gosh, somebody with 20 plus years, I'm not even going to be able to afford them. You've just quantified something, and now there is an unconscious potential bias because you've just quantified that. And then if you say executive leadership, well, gosh, they're just going to want to lead. They're not going to want to get into the details. So long live the summary, but you do have to be careful. It's the first thing that you're going to say to introduce somebody to yourself and somebody to what you're interested and maybe willing to do. So again, read it, have somebody else read your summary, spouse, friend. It's also good to maybe ask somebody that isn't maybe as close to you, that doesn't know you as well. A professional, somebody that's a professional mentor is, hey, if you didn't know me, what would you think if you read this summary? What would this tell you? So proofreading doesn't just mean, do I have everything spelled correctly? Do I have everything, my grammar is correct? Sometimes it's, if you were going to read this resume and you didn't know me, what would you think of me? Would you hire me for an analyst position? Or would you think I would only be able to be, interested in maybe a CFO position? Quantify. We already talked about this a little bit. Quantifying your accomplishments. You want to speak to your accomplishments. You want to be able to talk about the things that you have done, what changes you have made. Companies want to hire people that are going to contribute to the organization. And how do you quantify your accomplishments? Again, by dollars, by days, by reducing things, by getting things done on time, by getting things done early. Again, look at how you can quantify those things that you've done within your organization. Use strong, meaningful words. Again, I take this as action words. Again, reduced, implemented, created, collaborated. Again, these are very action verb oriented words. You want to make sure that you are using these words. The other thing that I also say from a meaningful word standpoint, again, going back to the AI, you don't have to rewrite your resume every single time, but you do want to be mindful of the resume that you are sending to a company, that again, you are using back to them the same words that they used to describe the position. If they are looking for someone, again, back to the accounting world, guys, sorry, it's just my specialty. If they are using words like financial analysis, budgeting, forecasting, modeling, mergers and acquisitions, whatever they are using as keywords to describe, you want to be able to make sure that you are parroting those back to them in your resume. Caveat to that, only if it is germane to your experience. If you don't have mergers and acquisitions experience, don't put it in your resume. You cannot misrepresent yourself just trying to make sure that you get to be that top 7 of the 40 that get seen, because you want to make sure that obviously you're always being truthful and factual within your resume. There's a couple of ways of doing this. So yes, you want to make sure that as you're describing your experience that you have those there. There's another spot in a resume that I've seen with a lot of frequency that I like as well. So imagine this, you have the summary, which is just probably 2 or 3 lines, very brief paragraph about yourself. Beneath that, I see a section that people oftentimes use, and it's a section called professional skills. And in that section, people kind of almost use it as a table where it's probably 3 words across and maybe 5 words deep, if you can imagine that. So it's kind of a table of about 15 words to maybe describe your experience. And it can be 12, it can be whatever is appropriate for you. That's another place where if you've read the job description, you can make sure that you've also plugged those words again into your professional skills section. That's a good way to be able to get those words again so that AI sees them a second time. Again, the more times you have those words repeated, AI logic is going to say, you must be the most qualified person for this job because logically you have said these words the most frequently. So I'm going to put you in the top 10% of applicants. Any questions about any of that? Anything new in the chat? Okay, let's go on. Double check everything. Again, check it yourself. You can go error blind. You can read something. I one time had a candidate that read their resume, and they just were, they were just scanning it. They looked at it so many times that they were shocked to see that they had misspelled their name in their email address. So if they were going to contact them, it was going to be pretty tough to contact them because their email address was incorrect or their phone number was incorrect. So double check, have somebody that you trust also take a look at it to make sure that everything is accurate and correct. So let me ask in the chat, what is the one thing based on what we've talked about today that maybe as you're kind of looking at, maybe you have your resume pulled up in front of yourself, what's one thing based on what we've talked about today that you might go in and change about your current resume? I'll give you guys a second to kind of look at. I'd love to hear what you guys are maybe thinking.
Well, they're working on that. There's a question.
Oh, great, great.
What suggestions for someone who's been in the workspace for 40 plus years is looking for a professional position? Employers appear to want people who have a long
Okay, that's a great question, and you're not alone. There are a lot of individuals who, again, are taking advantage of the job market that we're in, which here in Lexington, I still see that to be a very, very strong market based on the companies that I continue to talk to every day. If you have a 40-year career, congratulations. That's a lot of hard work. Congratulations on your success. You are to be admired and certainly congratulated for that. Companies want to know what your most recent experience is. Your experience that you got 40 years ago is probably not the experience that's going to get you your next job. So there's nothing to say that you can't find a natural break in your resume and maybe take your resume back to the last 15 years. Now, if 15 years ago, and again, back to the accounting world, if 15 years ago you were an accounting manager and that's the first position that you list on your resume, they're going to know that right out of school you didn't start off immediately as an accounting manager. That's okay. But they're still interested in what have you done in the last 15 years. Now, maybe it's a 20-year where you kind of have that natural break. So it's okay to go back. What it's not okay to do is pick and choose what you want to put in your resume or not. So in the last 40 years, you can't kind of, well, I'm going to pick this job and this job and I'm just going to use these. You really do need to have that chronological, I was here, here, and here, not here. I'm not going to mention this one and I'm just going to talk about this one and this one. So you want to be able to kind of have that natural cutoff. It's also okay. I think the question was, employers want people with maybe a little bit of a longer runway. Runways have gotten a lot longer these days. So I oftentimes think that maybe that's our perception of what companies are going to think, and that may not necessarily be the reality. You don't have to put a date on the day you graduated from school. Again, there are ways that you can kind of leave that to where a company's just more focused on your most recent experience. And again, maybe just cut your resume to the last 20 years and see if you get different results.
Okay, in response to your question, what's one thing you can do to improve your resume?
Good.
When detailing the accomplishments, try to use superlatives sparingly. Spell check, spell check, spell check. The link. Be mindful of that. Add quantitative action verbs or qualitative action verbs. Someone's asking, can I leave off my home address, just state and country?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny, I've seen more and more individuals leave their home address information off. Oftentimes I'll just see a city and then their phone number and their email address. Mm-hmm.
Add same words from the description, professional skills. Yeah, that's right. You tried it in the chat.
Perfect. I agree. And I think just tweaking it just a little bit, your resume still to this day, lots of things have changed, but the one thing that hasn't is your resume's your ticket into the interview. So you just want to stay current. If you are looking for a controller position, oftentimes I'll have people say, I don't even know where to start. It's been 20 years since I wrote a resume. I don't even know where to start. I think that was one of our initial questions. My advice always is Google. What did we do before Google? All the information that we didn't know. Have you been to a dinner party lately and you asked a question and somebody didn't know the answer and you just Google it and then a minute later you know the answer? What did we do before Google came on? We just walked around without knowing and we were okay with that. But we have Google, so we can use it. So what I would say is if you haven't written a resume in some time, Google resume templates for the job that you want. If the next position that you are wanting to take and it's a promotion and you want to be the controller of the next company, simply do a Google search, right? Controller resume template, and then click on images when the search comes up. And you will see 50 different templates of resumes, and then pick which one you think appeals to you the most. If you've been in a position to hire, look and see what templates of resumes really caught your attention and mimic and mirror those. But Google is a great resource to be able to go and just kind of see what are people doing with resumes these days. That professional skills section that I mentioned, if you Google resume templates, you'll see lots of different examples of how to put in that professional skills information. But Google is a great resource to be able to just go in and figure out what's current and what's the best way to format a resume. Any other questions in the chat? Okay. Any other questions beyond resume? We spent most of the time on resumes. Any other questions just about the job market, kind of what's happening, what's different, what are we seeing? Anything that anybody has any questions just about the market overall and just kind of the current employment climate that we're in? I'd be happy to try to answer whatever you guys have. Yes.
My question is, should someone that is applying for a job be troubled if they apply for a job and it's reposted? It comes back, reposted, they were considering that first time that they applied, maybe didn't get an interview, and now they see that job once again. Should they reapply for it if it's still something they desire, or should it be something of concern?
Yep. Okay. So the question is, what if I've applied for a job and I see the company repost that position? It's a great question. Should you reapply or not? The answer is yes. If they're still looking, then reapply. Some applicant tracking systems may not allow you to reapply, but that's okay. You're in the database. But don't be discouraged. Again, we have a system out there that probably has an algorithm that says repost this position weekly until it is closed. It doesn't mean that you haven't been considered. It doesn't mean that they are not in the process of reviewing applicants and bringing candidates in. So it could just be a system that they've set up that every week they're going to repost that job until that person starts the position. It's good to know that it's still out there. So here's what you might be able to do. So if you see that position posted, again, we talked about LinkedIn at the very beginning. Connect with somebody with that company. Go to the HR. Who's the HR manager for that company? Connect with them and send them a personal note to say, I've recently applied to the accountant position. I'm excited about, hearing, about more about that job. Again, so there's different ways to kind of tap a company because of all the, kind of all the technology that we have today. But great question.
There's another question in the chat for you. We're hearing a lot about negotiating salary or wage. Any tips on asking or inquiring about that when in the process, before or after a position is offered?
Okay, great question. So you need to have an idea of what your value and your worth is through the interview process. So you certainly want to know kind of going in what your dollar amount is. So if it's a position that you're being considered for and you know that you're not going to leave your current job for any less than $80,000, that's what I'm going to have for this position, then know that going in. And if the offer comes in at 75, know what your walkaway is, know what your value is. If you're going to ask for more money than what's being offered, then have reason and compelling reason. So understand the benefits. Are the benefits more expensive at the new company than they are at your current company? So if you need an extra $5,000, it's not just a, hey, I'd like to make 5,000 more. And that's okay too, but it's probably going to go better in that conversation if there's some compelling reason as to why you're asking for a different number than necessarily is being offered. In negotiation, we've all probably heard this, the first person that speaks loses. Sometimes they're going to ask you in the interview, what are you looking for? If you're asked, you need to answer, but that's where, again, you want to have your homework and you want to know truly what your value is. So let's say you would love to have 80, but you'd be okay in the upper 70s. How I would typically coach somebody to answer that question is, with the positions that I have been considering, they've been in the 80s range. Depending on benefits and full package, I may have a little bit of flexibility, but that's where I'm kind of seeing the market right now. So again, now you're bringing in market intel and you're letting them know what types of positions you're being considered for, that it's not just a number that I've pulled out of thin air, but this is where it seems to be my value currently. And then you can ask them, how does that fit into what your expectations are for this position? And if it's a job you really want, and maybe it is 5,000 less in negotiation, you can also ask for a 6-month review rather than a 12-month review. Can I prove to you in the first 6 months that I'm worth a bit more? And can in the first year I get a review at 6 months rather than waiting a year? And could we then reestablish that? If they are okay with that, you also have to be okay if in 6 months you don't get the money that you wanted. You've got to be able to prove your value and your worth there too. Next question.
Okay, next question for you is, can you share your thoughts on remote work? And do you think this new trend will be considered for more and more jobs in the future?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to talk about that. So I think that there is a perception that there are a ton of remote jobs out there. Over the last since the beginning of the year, of all the jobs that I have worked on, which have been a lot, there are only 2 positions that I've had that have been remote positions. Companies are bringing people back into work, and I'm excited about that. I have a lot of candidates that are excited about that. And then I have a population of candidates that really want to stay remote. A lot of companies are considering hybrid, which is great. It's kind of the best of all worlds. I hear from a lot of candidates that, I've proven over the last 2 years that I have been able to get my job done. And so I'm frustrated that my company is requiring me to come back into the office. And the conversations that I have is, 2 years ago, you were coming into the office every day and that was okay. You enjoyed it. Company's salary, and I think we have to understand both sides of the equation. Yes, candidates want to feel valued and they want to, feel appreciated for the work they've done and how successful we've been at home. Kudos to all of us that have survived this and have succeeded and have excelled. But remember that the salary that you're being offered by the company is not to just get the work done. It's also to contribute to the collaboration and the culture of the business. And that's where businesses continue to thrive. And so they are inviting people to come back in and again, be a part of that culture and really be a part of that organization. Working from home, I'm concerned, this is a Lisa James opinion, not a Robert Half opinion. I am concerned about how people are going to continue to develop and grow working remotely, as opposed to being in, face to face with your mentor and such. Again, the world has evolved from a career standpoint, from a job standpoint, certainly much different than when I started with Robert Half 27 years ago. So I think we've evolved and there will be a place for those types of things. But I'm just locally not seeing as many remote opportunities as I once was locally. There are still other companies that are coming into our market and pulling people from a remote standpoint. So they're still out there. But as far as local businesses, if you're local and they're local, they really would love to have you in the office a couple of days a week. So if you want that, maybe you could kind of talk about a hybrid option. But the full-blown remote is starting to kind of go away bit by bit. Long answer to a short question, sorry. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. Anything else that I haven't covered that you guys wanted me to cover this morning? We're good? Okay. A couple other really quick things. We have some great resources. So no matter what type of a career you're in, no matter what your specialty is, I think there's something truly on our website. It is a fantastic resource. You can go to our Robert Half blog that has great information about interview tips, negotiating tips, resume tips, what to do. And then we also have our 2022 salary guide. You can go to our website and download our salary guide. There's great information there, again, about salaries under all of our practice groups, which is accounting, finance, technology, administrative, creative, legal. I know I'm leaving somebody out, human resources, but go to our website. You can download that salary guide. The salary guide also has information about trends about remote work, trends about benefits, what are companies offering, trends about diversity, inclusion, equality. That's so important today. And so it just kind of talks about what you should be asking companies as it comes to those types of things. So I really appreciate your time today. As always, I'm always so honored to participate with this group. group. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to reach back out to me. Hopefully you downloaded my business card, but you can find my LinkedIn page at Lisa James. I'm at Robert Half, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you guys might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We always learn so much from you. You are in the trenches every day working with employers and job candidates. So we know what you're sharing is timely and always lots of takeaways from your presentation. So thank you so much for your support. Who's hiring? At this time, if we have any employers that are online, if you would share in the chat box any job openings that you may have, or please email us those job leads by noon today, and we will include those in our follow-up Job Club newsletter that will go out this afternoon. Be sure and read those. We get lots of job leads every week. Also, be sure and check out our LinkedIn page, because sometimes jobs close quickly, and we do have more and more employers that are posting on that LinkedIn page. It is an open page to both job seekers and employers, so we welcome engagement in that space. Let's share a little bit of news from our partners. Cooperative Extension, not only here in Fayette County, but in all 120 counties in the state. Fabulous programs are going on this time of year for your home, your garden, your finances. So many resources with your local Cooperative Extension office. We do encourage you to follow them on Facebook and check out the homepage for the Cooperative Extension office in your county. They're an incredible resource. From STEPS, we had a successful job fair with UK a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing lots more candidates apply. Currently sourcing for an executive administrative position. So please look for that on STEP's website, and many more positions as well as on the STEP's website. That's the temporary division for UK and the UK permanent division as well. With Alumni Career Services, alumni career counselors are available to help one-on-one if you need additional assistance in your search. That is a benefit of membership for active and life members of the UK Alumni Association, and anyone can join. You don't have to have attended UK to join. We'll have information also in the newsletter today on how to take advantage if you're feeling like you need a little more one-on-one help with your resume, interviewing, career assessments, or job search strategies. So be sure and check that out as well. Next time, we're excited to have my colleague Amanda Shagney present LinkedIn or Linked Out. Lisa has referenced today the importance of LinkedIn. It is crucial in your job search to be active on LinkedIn. Amanda's going to share incredible tips and strategies on how to build a better profile and how to use LinkedIn in your job search, whether you're actively in a job search or if you're just kind of lurking or considering a job search. LinkedIn is your friend. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Central Kentucky Job Club. We do welcome in-person attendees as well as hybrid. If you're here local, we do encourage you to attend in person. We meet at the Fayette Cooperative Extension office twice a month, and in-person attendees are always welcome to stay afterwards and network and strategize more about your job search. Keep in touch. Let us know your success stories, and we will look forward to seeing you next time at Job Club.